The Berlin Wall. Throughout history, humans have put up walls to protect ourselves, to separate us from our enemies, or to signify our ownership. There are 3 man-made walls in history that are considered to be the classics. Hadrian's Wall was built by the Romans across the middle of Britain and was guarded by troops to control movement between the Roman-controlled south and the Celtic north. The Great Wall of China was erected in pieces over centuries, with the hopes that it would protect China's borders from invaders. Perhaps the most famous fortification in modern history was constructed in the 20th century in Germany, the Berlin Wall. In the 1940s, World War II had ended with the emergence of 2 new world superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Almost immediately, tensions arose between these 2 world players. As this tension compounded, the icy relationship between these 2 countries grew. Shortly after the war, political leaders in Russia began to call Western democracies their enemy. The Western response was best summarized in Winston Churchill's 1946 speech, where he spoke of an Iron Curtain that was dividing Europe into 2 parts, the democratic West and the communist East. Soon, this clash of political ideologies dominated the world political arena, and other countries were forced to pick a side. This great division came to be known as the Cold War. Over the next decades, the Cold War continued to escalate. Various treaties and pacts strengthened the relationship between the leading countries of the West. They allied themselves to one another in the face of the possibility of another world military conflict. Simultaneously, Russia led the effort to ally the countries of Eastern Europe together. A series of conflicts arose around the world as these alliances were gaining momentum. Events such as the Korean War and the Hungarian Revolution fueled a flame of discord between the 2 dominant political ideologies. After the war, Stalin had forbidden Eastern Europe to accept the aid offered by the West. Eastern Germans lived in poverty, with food shortages, low wages, and poor housing. The Soviet Union took for themselves around 25% of the goods produced in East Germany, under the directorship of Russia's leader, Joseph Stalin. In 1961, thousands of East Germans had fled to West Berlin. This burst followed a decade of immigration of Eastern Germans by the millions into the West. Many Eastern Germans fled to Western Germany, where aid had been accepted and the way of life held more promise. Still, many chose to stay in the place that was their home and avoid the stigma of Nazism that had permeated Western Germany during the war. In response to this economic instability brought on by this massive immigration, the Eastern German communist governing body, based in Berlin, had a wall built through the middle of the city, the Berlin Wall. This wall would divide Berlin and separate Western Berlin and Eastern Germany. This was the new front for the Cold War. The initial wall that was built was of barbed wire and cinder blocks in a single night in August of 1961, following the day it was commissioned. The West was surprised and furious. As time went on, Eastern Germans realized that they were living in a corrupt police state. This picture shows a German soldier defying orders and helping a child to cross the makeshift wall. The hopes of the good things socialism might bring were quickly dashed. Men lost their jobs on the other side of the wall. Grandparents could only see their grandchildren from afar. The Eastern German government refused to remove the wall, even after the West pleaded to do so. Over time, the barbed wire wall was replaced with concrete sections up to 15 feet high. Barbed wire stretched over the top to keep ambitious climbers from crossing. Loved ones could no longer see each other. This wedding took place in West Berlin, and they are waving to their family in East Germany. Parts of the wall were electrified. Guarded watchtowers were sprinkled along the wall, accompanied by a no-man's land. At its completion, it spanned the width of Berlin and extended 75 miles around West Berlin to divide it from Eastern Germany and to isolate it. Eastern German citizens lived in fear of being spied on by an army of government-commissioned informants. Defectors were imprisoned, This helped to keep possible uprisings at bay, as well as preventing infiltration by Western culture. A series of traps, tripwires, and patrolling soldiers on the eastern side discouraged citizens to attempt to cross, while soldiers on the western side came to the aid of any who topped the wall. 13-year-old Alexandra Schmidt watched the wall go up when she was a girl, and her family adjusted to life without access to West Berlin. She adjusted to the poor living conditions and the bleakness of her city. A few years later, when her older brother tried to escape, he watched another man be shot by the guards. He ran home and swore never again to try to leave. The wall had served its purpose, and he and his family would endure hardships and remain largely untouched by Western culture until the wall would come down decades later. His story is not uncommon. Still, during the wall's lifetime, around 5,000 Eastern Germans successfully crossed into Western Berlin, utilizing everything from hot air balloons to sewer access. The same number of Germans were also captured in their attempts, and over 100 were killed by the guards. The wall's physical purpose came to symbolize the political divide between Eastern and Western Europe. The Cold War raged on. Then in the 1980s, U.S. President Ronald Reagan launched a strategy to build up American defenses, particularly with arms and technology. His plan was to pressure the Soviet Union into spending comparable amounts to bolster their own defenses, which they couldn't afford. It worked. Then in 1985, President Reagan met with Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev. Meetings continued over the coming years, eventually resulting in the collapse of the Soviet Union and a peaceful end to the Cold War. Over the next several months, communism began to lose its grip in the East. Then on November 9, 1989, Eastern Germany's communist government announced that its citizens could cross the wall beginning at midnight. What resulted was a huge street party, as people used everything from hammers to bulldozers to knock down the wall. The Berlin Wall, the physical manifestation of the Iron Curtain that Churchill had declared years before, had finally fallen. A year later, Eastern and Western Germany officially reunited. Communism fell across Eastern Europe, and the Cold War ended quietly. Today, the wall's pieces can be found in various museums around the world, a visual reminder of the volatile time when the East and the West engaged in a tense hostility that manifested physically in the wall that divided poverty from prosperity, communism from democracy, and suppression from freedom. Let us not forget.